They told her to step away from the piano, yeah, like she was some kind of threat, like her work boots were poison for the Steinway. She's just the janitor, somebody muttered. And then, a sharper voice, amused but almost bored, don't let her scratch the Steinway. That got a laugh. You know that sound, right? That little ripple of mean-spirited giggles people use to remind you where you stand. Elise Marlowe just stood there, mop in hand, stage lights glaring, the room smelling faintly of lemon and old sweat. She didn't move, she didn't speak, and for a second she looked at that piano like it was an old friend who'd stopped calling years ago. Not a soul in that rehearsal hall knew her. Not really. Not until she sat down and let her fingers hover above the keys. And let me tell you, the moment that came next, it didn't just silence a bunch of cocky music majors. It rattled something much bigger than any one person in that room. This isn't some fairy tale about a standing ovation or a second chance that fits on a Hallmark card. No, what happened to Elise, what she did next, it was more like a reckoning, the kind you never see coming but, once it's here, you wonder how the world ever got along without it. So, if you've ever been underestimated for what you look like, or the job you do, or the way you don't quite fit the picture, yeah, stick around. Because the note Elise played that night, it cracked open more than just a fancy concert hall. By 33, Elise had just about perfected the art of being invisible. At the Northbridge Conservatory, a place that looked down on the city from a hill, like it was too good to even touch the ground, she was a shadow in a gray crewneck and scuffed boots, slipping past students with expensive haircuts and even more expensive attitudes. She mopped floors. She ate her lunch out on the back steps alone. She clocked in before dawn and disappeared before dusk. Some professors nodded vaguely in her direction. Most didn't bother. Sometimes folks assumed she didn't speak English. Mostly, they didn't assume anything at all. Her ID badge? Couldn't read it. Nobody cared enough to try. Thing is, they should have. Because once upon a time, Elise Marlowe was that kid, the prodigy everyone whispered about. At 7, she played Chopin's Fantasy Impromptu live on TV, her little feet dangling off the bench. By 9, she was touring Europe with a youth orchestra, her hands studied in journals for their crazy flexibility. She didn't just read music, she absorbed it, remembered every note like it was a second heartbeat. But brilliance? Man, it's fragile when there's no one to guard it. Elise's mom did everything she could, singing in bars, waiting tables, ironing other people's clothes until her hands ached. But cancer doesn't care. When her mom died in Elise's last year of high school, it was like somebody just yanked the rug right out from under her life. Scholarships disappeared, college apps went nowhere, and before she could catch her breath, she was dropped into the foster system, a place with zero patience for Chopin or talent or grief. For 10 years, she didn't touch a piano. Didn't talk about it either. When she finally drifted back to the city, she wasn't chasing spotlights. She was chasing paychecks, rent money, and maybe, if she was honest, the echo of a note she still couldn't let go of. She took the custodial job at Northbridge because it was steady. Because nobody there would recognize her. Because, honestly, there were pianos in every hallway, even if she could only listen. That's what she did. Night after night, after the students and professors cleared out, Elise would wander to a practice room, never turning on the lights, and just sit in the dark, feeling the vibrations humming through the floor, the walls, her bones. Sometimes she put her hands on her knees, just remembering. It wasn't about being a star again. It was about remembering what it felt like before grief set fire to her whole world. Now, here's where it starts to get interesting. One night, a guest lecturer, a half-retired composer named Lionel Thorne, passed by and heard music drifting from what was supposed to be an empty wing. He didn't interrupt, just stood there listening. When the music faded, he whispered to himself, whoever that is, she's not learning to play, she's learning to return. After that, Thorne started hanging around late, too. He never told anybody what he was up to. Maybe he saw something in Elise. Maybe he just heard what everyone else missed. Either way, that was the start. Thorne didn't barge in and offer her a deal or some miracle lesson. He just left a note on the supply closet door. There's a Baldwin upright in room 207. Needs tuning, but it's honest. Keys under the mat. That was it. Elise stood there for ages, wondering if it was real. That night, she found the key, sat down, and pressed middle C. It was flat, a little sad, but it was home. Over the next weeks, she kept coming back. Every Tuesday and Thursday, always after dark, always alone except for Thorne waiting in the hallway with his thermos of tea. He never corrected her, never lectured. He just told stories about orchestras and heartbreak and how silence was sometimes the most important note. You don't play the keys, he'd say. You play the space between them. She started composing again, nothing flashy, just raw, unnamed pieces. Once she called 13 steps down for the stairs she'd sat on as a kid, eavesdropping on lessons she couldn't afford. Another was just a series of aching chords, nothing but memory. One night, Thorne gave her a blank manuscript book. If you're gonna reclaim your voice, he told her, you might as well give it a home. She didn't cry, but she held onto it like it was holy. He suggested music that breathed, Satie, Arvo part, the kind of stuff that taught you how to be honest, not just impressive. Little by little, her hands remembered, her left, stiff from years of hard work, got its grace back. Her right hand, the one she'd almost forgotten, started to dance again. It wasn't about applause. It was about listening, really listening to herself, to the instrument, to silence. Then, out of nowhere, the rumors started, students whispering about the janitor playing Chopin better than the faculty. Some hotshot senior named Colin Wexler and his crew didn't like that. They set a trap, a community rehearsal with glossy flyers, the whole 9 yards. We'd love to hear you play, they said, all fake smiles. Elise almost said no, but when someone finally looked at her like she mattered, yeah, it cracked something open. She agreed. That night, the rehearsal hall was packed, students, professors, parents. The Steinway Grand sat in the center, glowing under stage lights like an altar. Elise, in her gray uniform, hands shaking, walked up front. People whispered, snickered. One even tripped her, real classy. Colin made a show of pulling out the bench. Don't worry, it's clean, he sneered. Laughter again, louder now. She sat down, placed her hands in her lap, reached for the keys. Phones came out. Colin leaned into the mic, careful, that Steinway's worth more than your whole life, darling. The room roared. Elise just stared at the keys, breathing. Then she stood up, pushed the bench back, and walked out. Past Colin, she paused and muttered, you confuse silence with weakness. That's your first mistake. The room quieted. Not everyone laughed now. Some looked a little sick. But Elise wasn't running away. She was walking towards something. The next night, with no announcement, the rehearsal hall filled again. No flyers, no schedule, just a rumor. She was coming back. This time, she wore a simple black blouse, slacks, same boots, no uniform. No introduction, no words. She sat down at the Steinway, hands on the keys, breathed. Silence. Then, one note. Middle C, just a hair too long. Another note, and another. Nobody recognized the piece, not Chopin, not Bach. Even Thorne looked puzzled. Because it wasn't written. It was remembered. Elise played her story, every loss, every hope, every piece of herself she'd fought to reclaim. The music wasn't perfect. A few notes wobbled. Nobody cared. The room changed. Students stopped recording. Professors shifted forward. Colin, all swagger gone, just stared. At one point, Elise hit 3 discordant chords, hard, raw. It snapped the tension like a bone. Silence. 10 seconds, maybe more. Then, she played again, but softer, open, forgiving, like sunlight melting frost. When she finished, she didn't bow, didn't smile. She just stood, nodded once to Thorne, and walked out. The applause was wild, desperate, not polite. Some people cried. Colin? He just sat there, shattered. A woman from a record label tried to shake Elise's hand backstage. Elise shook her head. I'm not for sale. I just needed them to listen. By morning, the video, shaky, filmed on a phone, had 4 million views. The janitor who played the truth. Music blogs exploded. Northbridge's phones rang off the hook. Kids who'd made fun of her now posted about how they'd always believed in her. Colin deleted his socials. Elise? She went back to mopping floors. But the hush that followed her wasn't pity. It was respect. Offers poured in. Albums, documentaries, even a piano competition named after her. She turned them all down. I never needed a stage, she told a stunned producer. I needed space. He didn't get it. Most didn't. Northbridge scrambled to save face, called her a hidden enrichment program for non-traditional artists. Total PR spin. Elise didn't bother to respond. But she did leave a letter in the suggestion box. You don't need to change your mission. You need to remember it. Weeks later, the Marlowe Initiative launched. Anonymous auditions, open scholarships, the works. All because Elise forced them to listen. But she wasn't interested in press conferences. She started teaching kids. Anywhere, everywhere. In a church basement, a library, a battered classroom with broken keys. She showed them how to touch the piano like it was an old friend, not a trophy. Word got out. A girl in Kansas wrote, "If the janitor can do it, maybe I can." A blind boy in Jakarta posted a video playing Elise's melody by ear in a train station. People called it Marlowe's Echo. Music teachers everywhere started holding unseen recitals. No names, no resumes, just sound. Elise never signed autographs, never made a record. She just went where she was needed, helping a hearing-impaired kid in Detroit feel rhythm through his feet, showing an autistic girl in Marseille how to paint music with color and breath. Her legacy was space. A blank wall, a bench with boots underneath, a listening room where students remembered why they started. Northbridge changed, not because it wanted to, but because it had to. The world changed with it. Conservatories opened doors to late bloomers and misfits. A girl in Lisbon swore Elise played beside her on a subway upright. Someone saw her in Patagonia, teaching a child to find her first note. But she never went back to Northbridge. Not because she was bitter, but because she'd already given them everything. Her final public appearance wasn't a concert. It was just a moment. A battered classroom, chipped piano, kids who'd never been told their voice mattered. Elise walked in, asked, "What does your voice sound like if no one's telling you what to say?" She played beside them, not above. When they played, awkward, hesitant, beautiful, she listened. The next day, she was gone. No note, no encore. Just one line on the whiteboard. If you can hear it, it already belongs to you. Now, in the Marlowe room at Northbridge, students gather, not to win, not to impress, but to share sound. And sometimes, a new player sits down, trembling, and the room listens. Because music isn't something you earn. It's something you remember, a note buried under silence, a voice denied, a truth too soft for noise but too strong for forgetting. And that's where Elise lives now, not in halls of fame, but in the hands of anyone brave enough to start again. She didn't become a legend. She became a bridge. And if you listen, when the world goes quiet, you might just hear her still. So, now it's your turn. What do you think matters more? Who gets to play, or who's willing to listen? Go ahead, argue in the comments. Because justice, music, belonging, maybe it's not about who owns the stage. Maybe it's about who dares to make room for a new voice, even when it's whispering.